A 26-year-old woman steps through the doorway of a small coffee shop, her arms cradling 24 months of sleepless nights, judgmental stares, and a secret that could shatter the fragile hope she's carrying. On the other side of the room sits a widower, father to one, his coffee untouched, his guard already raised. What unfolds in the next 60 seconds will either validate every fear she's learned to expect, or it will rewrite everything she believed about being truly accepted. But first, tell us, where are you watching from today? We love knowing how far these stories reach across the world. The bell above the door of the Wandering Bean chimed softly, but to Emma's ears, it might as well have been a siren. Her pulse quickened as she scanned the intimate space, her grip instinctive on little Riley's warm weight against her side. There, near the window, a man with chestnut hair and weary eyes that mirrored her own exhausted reflection. He was already watching her, his expression morphing from polite expectation to visible surprise as his gaze landed on the child perched on her hip. And here it comes, Emma thought, willing her legs forward. Let the rejection begin. She had chosen her outfit with surgical precision that morning, a crimson dress she'd pressed until her arm ached, her auburn hair swept back and what she hoped appeared intentional rather than hastily assembled. Riley had battled her through every diaper change and shoe negotiation, and now clung to her mother's neck with the determined grip of a small primate. Nathan stood as she approached, his knee catching the table edge, sending his coffee dangerously close to disaster. "Emma," he said, his voice steadier than his movements suggested. "Wait, no, Riley, I'm sorry. Yes, hello. Hi there." The man was anxious. That surprised her. Riley lifted her head from Emma's shoulder, fixing Nathan with the kind of direct, unblinking examination that only toddlers, and particularly discerning felines, could master. One plump finger found its way between her lips as she studied him with the focus of a researcher analyzing an intriguing specimen. Emma inhaled deeply. This was the moment, the precise instant where he would fabricate an excuse about leaving something in his vehicle, or suddenly recall an urgent obligation, or simply stand and exit, like the man 4 months prior who had looked at Riley and declared, "I'm not interested in raising another man's problem." The memory of that evening, sobbing in her vehicle for over an hour while Riley slept in her car seat, mercifully unaware she'd just been labeled a problem, fortified Emma's determination. "This is Riley," she said, words tumbling out rapidly. "My daughter. I realize I should have mentioned her sooner, but I wanted you to understand the complete situation before you made your decision to leave. Most men do leave. I understand completely if that's what you want. I'm exhausted from pretending to be someone I'm not. I'm a complete package. This is what that package looks like. If that doesn't align with what you're seeking, I won't take offense. Well, perhaps a small amount of offense, but I'll manage." The silence stretched like standing at a precipice edge. Emma studied Nathan's face, attempting to decode the subtle expressions flickering across it. Surprise, confusion, something that resembled recognition. "Would you care to sit?" he asked finally, indicating the chair opposite him. "Unless you prefer standing, though the seating here is reportedly quite comfortable, or so I've been told. I've only occupied mine for roughly 15 minutes, but thus far, 0 complaints." A tentative smile pulled at Emma's lips. You're not gonna leave?" "Why would I leave?" "Because I brought a toddler to a first meeting. Most men consider that a significant deal breaker." Nathan shrugged, and something in his eyes, a weariness matching her own, flickered. "I have a 4-year-old daughter at home. If anything, this simply indicates you understand that childcare is both expensive and unreliable." Emma lowered herself into the chair slowly, her legs suddenly unsteady. She adjusted Riley in her lap, and the little girl immediately launched a tactile exploration of the table's surface, her small palms patting the wood with scientific curiosity. "You have a daughter?" Emma managed. "Sophie. She's currently with my mother, likely convincing her that frozen dessert qualifies as a vegetable due to vanilla bean content." For the first time since entering that door, Emma laughed, a genuine laugh, startled from her like a bird flushed from branches. "Mama," Riley announced, tugging Emma's sleeve with the imperious authority of a miniature monarch. "Hungry." "I know, sweetheart. Just give me one. What does she enjoy? Nathan interrupted, already signaling their server, a teenager with azure-streaked hair and an eyebrow piercing. They serve these small fruit portions here, plus some variety of cheese crackers that Sophie always demands when we visit. Emma stared at him as though he'd just offered to resolve world hunger. Her mouth opened, closed again. She enjoys cheese and bananas. Perfect. Nathan smiled at the server, and Emma noticed how it softened his face, easing the tired lines around his eyes. Could we get a fruit portion, some cheese crackers, and... He glanced at Emma. What would you like? A latte, please. After the server departed, silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, exactly, but weighted with the strangeness of their situation. Emma watched Nathan watching Riley, who had discovered a fascinating imperfection on the table and was now tapping it rhythmically with one finger. Tap, tap, tap. Riley narrated her actions with documentary-level seriousness. That's exceptionally good tapping, Nathan told her solemnly. Riley beamed at him, revealing 4 tiny teeth. When their order arrived, Riley's eyes widened with the pure delight that only small children experiencing the materialization of snacks could achieve. She reached for the fruit cup with both hands, her coordination still developing at 2 years old. Pieces of banana and strawberry threatened to become casualties of her enthusiasm. Here, allow me, Emma started, but Nathan was already moving. May I? He asked, and the question was so gentle, so respectful, that Emma could only nod. She watched, frozen as Nathan, a man she'd known for approximately 12 minutes, reached across the table and carefully lifted Riley from her lap. He settled the toddler against his chest with the practiced ease of someone who had performed this action thousands of times, one arm supporting her back while his free hand held the fruit cup steady. Riley didn't protest. She simply melted into his hold, as though she'd known him forever, her small body relaxing into his arms. "Nana," Riley said approvingly, around a mouthful of banana that Nathan had just guided toward her eager mouth. "Excellent banana?" Nathan asked, seriously, as if her assessment of the banana's quality was of paramount importance. "Good, Nana. More. What's the polite word?" Riley pondered this with the gravity of a philosopher contemplating existence itself, her face scrunched in concentration. "Peas." Close enough. Emma had gone completely motionless across the table, her latte arriving and remaining untouched as she observed the scene unfolding. Something was occurring in her chest, like a fracturing sensation like ice breaking after an extended winter. When Nathan glanced up and caught her staring, he must have detected something in her expression because his own shifted to concern. "Is this acceptable? I didn't intend to just... Nobody has ever..." Emma's voice fractured. She pressed her fingers against her eyes, attempting to halt the tears threatening to fall. "I apologize. I'm sorry. It's just, nobody has ever done that before." "Done what?" "Treated her like..." She gestured helplessly at the scene before her, this stranger feeding her daughter fruit with the patience of a saint, as though it were the most natural action in the world. Like she's simply a person, not a complication to be resolved or a warning sign to flee from, just a person who enjoys bananas. "More Nana," Riley demanded, oblivious to the emotional moment happening around her. "See?" Nathan said softly, offering Riley another piece of fruit. "She understands what she wants. That's admirable. Honestly, half the adults in my life lack that kind of clarity." Emma laughed again, the sound wet with tears she was still attempting to suppress. She finally retrieved her latte, wrapping both hands around it as if it could anchor her to this moment, this impossible, unexpected moment where someone was demonstrating kindness to her daughter without expecting anything in return. "You're quite unusual, Nathan," she said. "I've been informed of that, typically less kindly." Emma had spent 2 years constructing walls around herself and Riley, anticipating rejection so she could brace for it. But here sat a man who had simply accepted them, both of them, without hesitation. It was terrifying. They talked, and conversation flowed with an ease that surprised them both. Nathan shared stories about Sophie, how she possessed her mother's dark curls and a stubborn determination that could relocate mountains. "She asked me recently why the moon accompanies our vehicle," he said, a smile playing at his lips, "and when I attempted to explain about the moon remaining stationary while we move, she said, 'Daddy, that's absurd. The moon clearly favors our car.'" How do you argue with that reasoning? You don't. I've learned that 4-year-olds are essentially miniature attorneys. They'll identify loopholes in everything. As they conversed, Emma found herself studying Nathan's face, the lines around his eyes suggesting both laughter and grief, the way his expressions softened when discussing his daughter, the gentleness in his hands as he kept Riley entertained with small pieces of fruit. "May I ask?" Emma hesitated, then continued. "Sophie's mother?" Nathan's expression shifted, and Emma immediately regretted the question, but he didn't withdraw. Instead, he gazed out the window at the mountains visible in the distance, his hands still absently rubbing Riley's back. "Claire," he said quietly, "she passed 3 years ago. Cardiac condition nobody knew existed. She was laughing at something Sophie said. Sophie was attempting to pronounce spaghetti, and it kept emerging as biscotti, and then she just collapsed. By the time emergency services arrived, she was gone." "Nathan, I'm so—" "You don't need to apologize," he interrupted gently. "Everyone apologizes, and I appreciate it, but mostly I miss her daily, and I'm terrified I'm going to fail Sophie because I'm managing this alone." The honesty in his words struck Emma like a physical impact. She understood that fear, the bone-deep fear of failing the small person who depended on you completely. "I'm certain you're doing wonderfully," she said, meaning it. "Some days I'm uncertain about everything." He shifted Riley slightly as she began to drowse against his shoulder, her small fist clutching a handful of his shirt. "I attempted dating twice. It proceeded about as well as you'd anticipate. One woman departed mid-meal and never returned. The other spent the entire evening discussing cryptocurrency and didn't inquire about Sophie once."
"People are terrible," Emma said with feeling. "Not all people," Nathan looked at her meaningfully. "Some people enter cafes with toddlers on their hips and give strangers second chances." Emma felt warmth rise to her cheeks. She busied herself with her latte, which had grown lukewarm. "My turn for an invasive question," Nathan said. "Riley's father?" And there it was, the question she'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. Emma's hands tightened around her cup. "Not involved," she said, which was technically accurate if you stretched the definition of truth until it protested. "It's been just the two of us since her birth." Another truth that was also a deception. The cognitive dissonance made her stomach ache. Nathan nodded, accepting this without probing for additional details. That must be challenging. "Some days more than others." Emma looked down at Riley, who had fallen asleep against Nathan's shoulder, her tiny chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. "But she's worth it. Every sleepless night, every judgmental glance at the supermarket, every date that concludes with someone calling her a problem, she's worth all of it. Anyone who calls her a problem is a fool." The fierceness in Nathan's voice surprised her. He was looking at Riley with something resembling protectiveness, and they'd only just met. It made Emma's throat constrict. "Thank you," I whispered. They remained at the cafe for 2 hours. Conversation wandered through safer territory, favorite literature, him, anything by Steinbeck, her, Austen, apologetically, childhood memories, him capturing fireflies at his grandmother's property, her constructing elaborate blanket fortresses with her sister, and the unique challenges of single parenthood. "Nobody warns you about the laundry," said Nathan with mock gravity. "How does one small human generate such quantities of laundry? I'm convinced Sophie cycles through 3 outfit changes daily purely for theatrical effect." Riley has begun having strong opinions about her socks. Apparently, certain socks are excessively scratchy and must be removed immediately with extreme prejudice. The sock rebellion, a classic. By the time they departed the cafe, the sun was beginning its descent over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose that looked almost artificial in their beauty. Nathan carefully transferred the sleeping Riley back into Emma's arms, and the toddler stirred slightly, mumbling something resembling Nana before settling against her mother's shoulder. "I had a genuinely wonderful time," Emma said, surprised by how much she meant it. For the first time in 2 years, a meeting hadn't felt like an ordeal to survive. It had felt like possibility. "Me too." Nathan's hands were in his pockets, and he appeared almost shy. "May I see you again? Both of you?" Emma hesitated. There remained so much he didn't know, things she had buried so deeply she sometimes forgot they existed. Secrets that felt like stones in her chest, growing heavier with each passing day. But for the first time in 2 years, she felt something that might have been hope. "Yes," she said, "I would appreciate that very much." The second meeting occurred at a park. Emma arrived with Riley in a stroller, the heavy-duty variety designed to handle mountainous terrain, and found Nathan already there, pushing Sophie on a swing, with the practiced rhythm suggesting thousands of afternoons just like this one. Sophie noticed first. She launched herself from the swing mid-arc with the fearlessness of a tiny superhero, landing in a crouch that would have stopped her father's heart if he weren't so accustomed to her acrobatics.
"Daddy, they're here! The lady from the photograph is here!" Sophie was already racing toward them, her dark curls bouncing with each step. "Sophie, what did we discuss?" Nathan called, jogging after her. "We don't run at strangers." "She's not a stranger, Daddy. She's Emma." Sophie skidded to a halt before the stroller, her eyes widening. "That's a baby." "Not a baby," Riley corrected from her stroller throne with all the dignity of a 2-year-old who had recently mastered the distinction. "Big girl." "You're a big girl?" Sophie crouched to Riley's eye level, her face serious. "How old are you?" Riley held up 2 fingers, then reconsidered and held up 3, then seemed to lose track of her objective and simply waved both hands enthusiastically. Sophie giggled. "I'm 4. That means I'm the biggest. I'm going to be your best friend, okay?" "Okay," Riley agreed, as if friendships were always this straightforward. And perhaps at that age they were. Emma watched Nathan watching his daughter and saw the mixture of pride and terror on his face, the universal expression of parents everywhere witnessing their children navigate the complex world of social interaction. "Apologies," Nathan said, coming to stand beside Emma. "She's been discussing this all morning. I showed her your photograph so she'd recognize you, and she's decided you're both her people now. There's no reasoning with her once she's issued a decree." "I like her," Emma said, meaning it. The third meeting was the one that altered everything. Nathan invited them to his house, a modest 2-story in a quiet neighborhood with a backyard clearly designed with a child in mind. There was a swing set, a sandbox, and what appeared to be the remnants of an ambitious garden overtaken by weeds. "I keep intending to address that," Nathan said sheepishly, gesturing at the garden. "But between work and Sophie and simply life, it keeps getting relegated to the bottom of the list." "I think it has character," Emma said diplomatically. Sophie had taken Riley by the hand the moment they arrived, leading her on a comprehensive tour of the backyard with the authority of a tiny real estate agent. "And this is where we bury treasure," Sophie explained seriously, indicating a patch of disturbed earth near the fence. "But we can't excavate it until summer because Daddy said so." "Summer," Riley repeated solemnly, as if filing away this crucial information. Inside, Nathan's house was lived in and loved. There were photographs on every surface. Sophie as an infant, Sophie missing her front teeth, Sophie covered in what appeared to be finger paint, and in several frames, a beautiful woman with brown hair and a smile that could illuminate rooms. "Claire." "That's my mama," Sophie announced, noticing Emma's gaze. She had materialized at Emma's elbow with the stealth of a tiny ninja. "She's in heaven now, but Daddy says she's still watching over us." "Your mama was very beautiful," Emma said gently. "I know," Sophie said it with the simple confidence of a child who had never doubted her own worth. "Daddy says I have her smile. Do you see it?" Sophie demonstrated her best smile, huge and gap-toothed and absolutely radiant.
I definitely see it, Emma confirmed. Your hair is really pretty too, Sophie said, switching topics with the conversational agility unique to 4-year-olds. It's like a princess. Can I touch it? Of course, sweetheart. Sophie reached out with surprisingly gentle fingers, running them through Emma's auburn hair. So soft. Riley, come feel. It's like a kitten. Riley toddled over with the determined gait of someone who had only recently mastered walking and was still extremely proud of this skill. She reached up, and Emma bent down so the little girl could pat her hair with both hands. "Pretty," Riley declared. "You're pretty too," Sophie told her seriously. "The prettiest baby, big girl, sorry, the prettiest big girl ever." Watching from the kitchen doorway, Nathan felt something shift in his chest, a door opening that he had thought was permanently sealed. His daughter, who had spent 3 years learning to live with loss, was laughing with 2 people they had known for less than a month, and Emma, who had entered that cafe carrying visible walls around herself, was smiling at Sophie with something that looked like affection. "She adores you," Nathan said when Emma joined him in the kitchen. The girls had taken their tea party outside, and through the window they could see Sophie carefully explaining the proper etiquette of serving invisible tea. "She's wonderful," Emma said. "You should be very proud." "I am, though I can't claim all the credit. She arrived that way, fearlessly kind, even when the world gave her every reason not to be." Emma was quiet for a moment, watching the girls through the window. "How do you do it? Talk to her about her mother?" Nathan leaned against the counter, considering the question. "Honestly, I tell her the truth, that her mama loved her more than anything in the world, that love doesn't end just because someone dies, that it's acceptable to be sad and acceptable to be happy, and neither one means you're forgetting." He paused. "She asks if I'm lonely sometimes, and I tell her the truth about that too, that I am, but that I have her, and that helps." "You're a good father," Emma said quietly. "I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do, right? Try our best and hope it's sufficient." The words settled between them, heavy with meaning neither was quite ready to examine too closely. The weeks transformed into months, and what had started as careful, tentative meetings evolved into something that felt like family. Emma found herself at Nathan's house 3 or 4 times weekly. Sometimes they'd prepare dinner together while the girls played, while Sophie orchestrated elaborate games and Riley enthusiastically destroyed whatever Sophie had just constructed. Other times they'd sit on the back porch after bedtime, discussing everything and nothing, while the night sounds hummed around them. "Sophie asked me today if you were going to be her new mama," Nathan said one evening, his voice careful. Emma's heart stuttered. What did he tell her? "I told her that I care about you very much, and that these things require time, that we're determining it as we proceed." He turned to look at her, and in the dim porch light his eyes were serious. "But between you and me, I'm falling in love with you, both of you, and that terrifies me because I've lost people I loved before, and I don't know if I'm brave enough to risk that kind of pain again." "Nathan!" "You don't have to say anything," gently. He interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know where I stand, where my heart is." But Emma did have something to say, words that had been building in her chest for weeks, pressing against her ribs like birds trying to escape. "I'm falling in love with you too, and it terrifies me even more because there are things you don't know, things about me and Riley that—" A cry from inside interrupted. Riley's distinctive wail, followed by Sophie's voice trying to soothe. "It's okay, Riley. The monster under the bed isn't real. I checked." They both rushed inside to find Riley sitting up in the guest bed where she'd been napping, tears streaming down her face, while Sophie patted her arm with the awkward comfort of a 4-year-old who had appointed herself as guardian. "Bad dream," Sophie explained. "I have them sometimes too, about the dark." Emma scooped Riley up, holding her close. "You're okay, baby. Mama's here." "Mama!" Riley hiccuped into her shoulder. "Scared." I know, sweet girl, but you're safe. You're always safe with Mama. Sophie climbed onto the bed, sitting cross-legged with the posture of someone preparing to deliver important information. When I have bad dreams, Daddy sings me the moon song. Do you want to hear it, Riley? Riley nodded, still sniffling. And so Sophie sang, in a high, slightly off-key voice that was nonetheless beautiful. You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. Nathan joined in, his deeper voice harmonizing with his daughter's. By the second verse, even Riley was humming along, her tears drying on her cheeks. Watching them, this man and his daughter, including her child in their ritual, making space for her in their grief, in their healing, Emma felt her walls finally, completely crumble. She was in love, deeply, terrifyingly in love, and she had no idea how to tell Nathan the truth. The girls' bond deepened with each passing day. Sophie appointed herself as Riley's protector and teacher, a role she took with utmost seriousness. Okay, Riley, repeat after me. May I please have a snack? Sophie would coach patiently. Snack, Riley would respond enthusiastically. Close enough. Daddy, Riley wants a snack. Riley began crying inconsolably whenever it was time to leave Sophie's house. Sophie home? She would ask every morning, her small face hopeful. See Sophie? We'll see Sophie soon, Emma would promise, and Riley's face would light up like sunrise breaking over mountains. One afternoon, Emma arrived at Nathan's house to find him kneeling in the hallway, carefully applying a bandage to Sophie's knee, while the 4-year-old explained in dramatic detail how she had sustained her injury. And then I jumped from the swing, which you said I shouldn't do, but Daddy, I had to because I'm training to be a superhero, and I landed wrong, but I didn't cry. Well, maybe a little, but only because it surprised me. Very brave, Nathan said solemnly, pressing a bandage to the bandage. Is Riley here yet? Sophie asked, craning her neck to look past her father. Oh, Riley, I have an injury, a very serious injury. Come see. Riley toddled over, her face creased with concern that was heartbreakingly genuine. Sophie hurt? Just a little, but your mama's here, so everything's better now. The casual way Sophie said your mama, as if Emma belonged to both children now, made something squeeze tight in Emma's chest. Later that evening, after the girls had been bathed and dressed in matching pajamas, Sophie's idea, they insisted on sleeping in the same room. Nathan set up a sleeping bag on the floor of Sophie's room, and within minutes both children had abandoned their separate sleeping arrangements to curl up together like puppies. Sophie's my sister, Riley announced, wrapping her small arms around the older girl. You're my sister too, my baby sister. Big girl, Riley corrected, but without much conviction. She was already drifting off. Nathan and Emma stood in the doorway, watching them. They're perfect together, Nathan murmured. They are, Emma agreed, and felt the weight of her secret grow heavier. Every compliment Nathan paid her about her mothering, every time he mentioned how much Riley had her eyes, except Riley didn't have her eyes at all, every time he talked about their future as if it were already certain, she had to tell him. The fear was paralyzing. What if he looked at her differently? What if he thought she had deceived him? What if this beautiful thing they were building crumbled under the weight of the truth? But she loved him. She loved all of them. Nathan with his gentle hands and patient heart, Sophie with her fierce protection and generous spirit, and Riley, whom she had loved from the moment she drew her first breath. And love, Emma had learned from her sister, required honesty, even when honesty was terrifying, especially then. October arrived with a chill that crept into the mountains like something alive. The leaves turned spectacular shades of crimson and gold, and Sophie insisted on collecting the prettiest ones to press in books. Riley, not understanding the assignment but eager to help, simply grabbed handfuls of leaves and threw them in the air, laughing as they rained down around her. "It's snowing leaves," she would announce. "Sophie, look, snowing!" "That's not how snow works," Sophie would explain patiently,
but it's very beautiful anyway." They were becoming a unit, a family in all but name, and with each passing day, Emma felt the weight of her deception growing heavier. One evening, as she was putting Riley to bed in her own small apartment, the toddler looked up at her with those enormous eyes, her Aunt Sarah's eyes, and said, "Love Sophie. Love Daddy Nathan." Emma's breath caught. "Daddy Nathan?" "Daddy Nathan," Riley confirmed, as if it were obvious. "My Daddy Nathan." Emma pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of her baby shampoo and the lingering sweetness of the bedtime cookies Nathan always snuck to both girls, despite Emma's protests. "Riley, baby, there's something Mama needs to tell you when you're bigger, about where you came from, about the woman who loved you first. But right now, you need to know that you are so loved. By me, by Sophie, by Nathan. You are the most loved little girl in the whole world." "Love Mama," Riley mumbled, already half asleep. "Love everybody." "That's right, sweet girl. Love everybody." But lying in her own bed that night, Emma stared at the ceiling and felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her chest. She thought about Sarah, beautiful, brilliant Sarah, who had lost her husband to a drunk driver and then lost her own life bringing Riley into the world. She thought about that terrible night in the hospital, the way Sarah had gripped her hand with desperate strength, her face pale and her voice failing. "Promise me," Sarah had whispered. "Promise me she'll know she's loved. Promise me you'll keep her safe." "I promise," Emma had said through her tears. "I promise, Sarah. I swear." And then Sarah was gone, and a nurse was placing a tiny screaming baby in Emma's arms, a baby who had just lost both parents before she even knew they existed. Emma made a choice born of love and grief and the desperate need to protect this tiny human from pity and questions and the weight of a tragedy she was too young to understand. She had told everyone Riley was hers. Let them assume. Let them judge. Let them call her irresponsible and reckless and whisper about her poor life choices in grocery store aisles. Better they judged her than pitied Riley. But now there was Nathan with his kind eyes and patient hands and the way he looked at her like she was something precious. Nathan, who deserved the truth, who deserved to know that the woman he was falling in love with had built her entire life around a lie. A lie told for love, but a lie nonetheless. It was a Thursday evening in late October. The air had that crisp bite that promised winter wasn't far behind. Nathan had made dinner, his attempt at homemade pizza that was slightly lopsided but made with enough love to compensate for any aesthetic shortcomings. The girls had eaten until their stomachs were full and their faces were covered in sauce, then had run off to play in Sophie's room, their laughter echoing through the house like music. Now they were asleep upstairs, tangled together in Sophie's bed, despite Nathan's attempts to settle them separately. He had stopped fighting it weeks ago. "They're going to suffocate each other one of these days," he said, coming back to the porch where Emma sat wrapped in a blanket. "Sophie's practically lying on top of her." "It's how they show affection," Emma managed, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. Nathan settled into the chair beside her, then paused. "Hey, you okay? You've been quiet all evening." This was it, the moment she'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. Emma took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "I need to tell you something. About Riley." She felt Nathan tense beside her. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. She's perfect. It's just..." Another breath. "I haven't been completely honest with you. About her. About how she came into my life." The words hung between them like smoke. Emma couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see his expression change from trust to confusion to betrayal. "Okay," Nathan said carefully. "I'm listening." "Riley isn't..." The words stuck in her throat. She forced them out. "She isn't my biological daughter." Silence, long and heavy and suffocating.
I had an older sister, Sarah. She was everything I wanted to be, smart and kind and fearless. She married her college sweetheart, David, and they were so happy, the kind of happy that makes you believe in soulmates. She wiped at the tears that had started falling. David was killed in a car accident 3 years ago, drunk driver. Sarah was devastated, but then she found out a few weeks later that she was pregnant. She said it felt like a miracle, like David had left her one final gift. Nathan reached for her hand. Emma clung to it like a lifeline. The pregnancy was supposed to be simple. She was healthy. Everything looked normal. But during the delivery, there were complications. She started hemorrhaging, and they couldn't... Her voice cracked completely. They couldn't stop it. Emma! She died in my arms, Emma sobbed. She was 31 years old, and she died holding my hand, begging me to take care of her baby. Her last words were, "Promise me she'll know she's loved." And then she was gone, and they put Riley in my arms, this tiny, screaming baby who had just lost everything before she even knew what she had.
The story poured out of her now, unstoppable. I looked at her and I knew I would do anything for her. I told everyone she was mine. It was easier than explaining, easier than watching people's faces change from curiosity to pity, easier than reliving the worst day of my life with every new introduction. She turned to face Nathan, her face wet with tears. I've let them judge me. I've let them call me irresponsible and reckless. I've let men call my daughter a problem, because as long as they were judging me, they weren't pitying her. As long as they thought I was just some young single mother, they weren't asking questions about dead sisters and tragic births and babies who came into the world through blood and grief. Emma, Nathan said again, but she wasn't done. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared. I was so scared that if you knew, you would look at me differently. Or worse, that you would look at her differently. That you would see her as something sad or broken or less than what she is. And what is she? Nathan asked quietly. Mine. The word came out fierce and absolute. She's mine. Not because I gave birth to her, but because I chose her. I choose her every single day. I'm her mother in every way that matters. Silence fell again, and Emma felt her heart stop. This was the moment he would pull away, make excuses, disappear from her life like all the others. Instead, Nathan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. Do you remember what I said the first day we met about Riley? Emma shook her head, too overwhelmed to think clearly. I said she's not a problem. She's a person. His voice was thick with emotion. That's still true. Whether you gave birth to her or not, you're her mother. You've been her mother every single day for 2 years. You gave up your 20s, your freedom, your peace of mind, so a little girl you loved would never feel alone. You're not angry? Why would I be angry? Because I lied for months. Nathan shook his head. You didn't lie. You protected her. You protected both of you, and when you trusted me enough, you told me the truth. That's all I could ask for. That's more than I expected. But I love you, Emma, Nathan interrupted. Both of you, and nothing you just told me changes that. If anything, it makes me love you more because I see now how strong you are, how fierce, how much you're willing to sacrifice for the people you love. Emma broke down completely, sobbing into his shoulder while he held her. She cried for Sarah, who would never see her daughter grow up. She cried for Riley, who would one day have to learn the truth about where she came from. And she cried with relief because finally someone saw her, all of her, and he hadn't run away. Sarah would be proud of you, Nathan whispered into her hair. She'd be grateful that Riley has a mother who loves her this much, and she'd be happy that you finally let yourself be loved too. They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other in the October chill and the promise of something new beginning. Inside, 2 little girls slept tangled together like sisters, which is exactly what they had become. Spring arrived like a gift.
The mountains bloomed with dogwood and rhododendron, and the air smelled like new growth and possibility. Nathan and Emma were married on a perfect April afternoon in his backyard, surrounded by family and close friends. They had kept it small and intimate, the kind of wedding that felt like a celebration rather than a performance.
Sophie served as flower girl, scattering petals with the enthusiasm of someone being paid by the petal. She wore a pale pink dress and had insisted on wearing her sneakers underneath, because princesses should be practical. Riley served as ring bearer, though the term was generous. She was more interested in eating the ribbons on the ring pillow than actually delivering said rings. At 3 years old, she had strong opinions about everything, and pretty bows were apparently meant for consumption.
"Riley, no,"
Emma had whispered during the ceremony, gently removing a ribbon from her daughter's mouth.
"We don't eat the decorations."
"Why not?" Riley asked, genuinely confused. The guests had laughed. Emma had cried happy tears. When it was time for vows, Nathan looked at Emma with the kind of love that made everyone present feel like they were intruding on something sacred.
"I promise to love you," he said, his voice steady, despite the emotion in his eyes. "And I promise to love our daughters, all of them, exactly as they are, for every day of my life. I promise to be patient when the mornings are chaos and the nights are long. I promise to see you, really see you, even when you're trying to hide. And I promise that our family, this beautiful, unexpected, perfectly imperfect family, will always be my first priority."
"That means he loves you forever and ever," Sophie whispered loudly to Riley.
"Forever," Riley repeated solemnly, as if filing away this important information. Emma's vows were shorter, her voice breaking on every other word. "You saw me," she managed, looking at Nathan through tears. "In the hardest day, in the scariest moment, you saw me, and you stayed. You didn't run from my chaos or my secrets or my complicated, messy life. You just stayed." She took a shaky breath. "I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that. I promise to love your daughter like my own, because she already feels like my own. And I promise to keep choosing us every single day, even when it's hard." "Mama pretty," Riley announced loudly, pointing at Emma's dress. "Like princess." More laughter, more tears. That night, after the guests had gone and the girls were finally asleep, Nathan and Emma sat on the porch once more. Their porch now, because this was their house, their family, their life. "Do you think Sarah would approve?" Emma asked quietly, a question that still haunted her in vulnerable moments. Nathan pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I think she'd be proud of you. I think she'd be grateful that Riley has a mother who loves her this much, and I think she'd be happy that you finally let yourself be loved too. I wish she could meet you. I wish she could see what we built, what Riley has." "I wish I could have known her," Nathan agreed. "But in a way I do. She's in Riley's laugh, in her stubborn streak, in the way she loves with her whole heart." He paused. "And she's in you, in the way you love fiercely and protect the people you care about. That's your sister's legacy. Not just Riley, but the way you chose to honor her memory by becoming the mother she couldn't be." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of their neighborhood. Somewhere inside, Sophie was probably having one of her epic dreams about being a superhero. Riley was probably sleeping sprawled across the entire bed, taking up far more space than should be physically possible for someone so small. In the morning, Riley would wake first, as she always did. She would crawl into Sophie's bed and whisper, with all the subtlety of a foghorn, "Wake up, Sophie! Wake up! It's morning time!" Sophie would groan dramatically and pull her sister under the covers for a tickle attack that would end with both of them shrieking with laughter. Nathan would make his famous pancakes, slightly burnt on the edges but made with enough love to compensate,
while Emma refereed the chaos of two small girls arguing over who got the purple cup. "It's my turn for purple," Sophie would insist. "My purple," Riley would counter, clutching the cup to her chest with the ferocity of a tiny dragon protecting its hoard. Nathan would solve the problem by producing a second purple cup he had bought specifically for this purpose, because he was a father who planned ahead. Later, they would go to the park. Sophie would push Riley on the swings, standing on her tiptoes to reach high enough, her face serious with concentration. "Higher, Sophie, higher!" Riley would demand, fearless in the way that only 3-year-olds protected by loving big sisters could be. Nathan and Emma would watch from a bench, their hands intertwined. "We did okay, didn't we?" Nathan would say. "Better than okay," Emma would agree. "We did something impossible. We made a family out of broken pieces." In the afternoon, they would stop by the cemetery. It was something Emma did once a month, bringing fresh flowers to Sarah's grave, sitting on the grass beside it, talking to her sister about everything and nothing. "Riley said I love you without being prompted yesterday, and she's starting preschool in the fall. She's so smart, Sarah, so funny and kind and stubborn, just like you." A pause. "I'm married now, to an incredible man who loves her like his own. Sophie is her sister in every way that matters. I kept my promise. She knows she's loved." Sometimes Sophie would come with them, placing her own flowers beside Emma's. "Hi, Aunt Sarah," she would say to the stone. "I'm taking very good care of Riley. She's my favorite person ever, except maybe Daddy and Emma, but she's in the top 3 for sure." And once, just once, Riley had asked, "Mama, who's this?" Emma had taken a breath, knowing this conversation would come eventually, but still unprepared for it. "This is your Aunt Sarah. She loved you very much. She wanted to be your mama, but she couldn't, so she asked me to be your mama instead." "Where is she?" "She's in heaven, baby, watching over you." Riley had thought about this with the seriousness of a tiny philosopher. Then she had placed her small hand on the headstone and said, "Thank you, Aunt Sarah, for giving me mama." Emma cried. Even now, months later, the memory made her eyes sting. But for now, on their wedding night, she simply sat with her husband on their porch and breathed. She had kept her promise to Sarah. She had given Riley a family, not the one they had planned, but the one they needed. She had let herself be loved, even when it was terrifying. And somewhere, Emma hoped, Sarah was smiling. If this story moved you, please share your thoughts. Leave a comment about the families we choose in the love that transcends biology. Have you ever witnessed a love that defied expectations? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.